Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear students, I am Sahib Noor and welcome to a new lecture of electromagnetic field theory. This is lecture number 6 and we will study topics from chapter number 2. The title name of the chapter is Vector Analysis. Our main topics of this lecture will be to discuss the integral calculus. We will study the surface integral as well as the volume integral in this lecture, and then we will discuss the gradient of a scalar field, in which we will discuss the maximum space rate of variation of a function in a specific direction, and then we will discuss the divergence of a vector field. The spread of a vector field is known as the divergence, and our last topic of this lecture will be to discuss the divergence theorem, which relate the volume integral with the surface integral. So let's start our first topic, which is about the integral calculus, and in first slide we will solve a surface integral. So we have to evaluate a surface integral for a closed cylindrical surfaces. The given function f and whose components are a r k1 divided by r plus a z k2 into z. So we will find the variation of this function along a closed cylindrical surface. The parameters for this cylinder, which is given, r is equal to 2. This means that the maximum value of the radius, the radial component, is 2, and the z component varies from -3 to +3, and the plane angle is equal to 2 pi. And we have to solve this integral, which is known as the surface integral f dot ds, and the integral is about a closed surface, so we put a circle on the integral notation. And this closed surface integral can be split into 3 open surfaces, as a cylinder has 3 surfaces: the upper surface or the upper plane, the lower surface or the lower plane, and we have a curved surface of a cylinder. Now we have to calculate ds for each surfaces, in which 2 surfaces are parallel to z-axis. The upper surface of the cylinder and lower surface of the cylinder are parallel to z-axis. So these surfaces must be formed by the radial component and the plane angle component of the cylinder. So dsz, which represent a surface whose direction is parallel to the z-axis, must be formed by the radial and the plane angle component, and this surface is equal to r dr d phi, and az is the direction of this surface. The black part represents the magnitude and the red part representing the direction. We have another surface which is parallel to the z-axis, that is the lower surface of the cylinder, and this is equal to d as z, and the magnitude is r dr d phi, and the direction of this surface is now parallel to minus z axis, so we put a negative sign with the magnitude. And by taking the dot product of these surfaces, or for the up surfaces with the given function, we will have k2 z r dr d phi. Now we will integrate this integral for some limits. For upper surface, z is fixed, which is equal to 3, and r can be varying from 0 to 2, and so the plane angle is also varying from 0 to 2 pi. By taking the integration with these limits, our integral will give us 12 pi k2. This is the answer of the surface integral for the upper surface. Now we will do the same for the lower surface, but in this case we will put z is equal to -3 and the limits are the same, and we will get the value of this surface integral, which is the lower part of the cylinder. The answer is 12 pi k2. Now for the curved surface, the area element dsr, this means that this area is now parallel to the radial direction, and this must be made by the other components of the cylinder, which are phi and z. So this surface is made by d phi dz multiply with a radial component, and the parameter for this curved surface r is fixed for the curved surface, which is equal to 2, and pi can be vary from 0 to 2 pi, and z is also varying from -3 to +3. So first we will take a dot product of this surface area with the given function. So our answer will be k1 divided by r d phi dz. So r will cancel with r, and we can integrate it only for d phi and dz. The limits are given, so our answer will be 12 pi k1. So now we have solved all the three surface integral, which are the surface integral for the open surface, and we will put the value of these surfaces in the above expression. This represent the value of the surface integral for the upper surface. This represent the value of lower surface for the cylinder, and this represent the value for the surface integral about the curved surface. So our final answer can be written as 12 pi into 2k2 plus k1. Now in this slide we will discuss a volume integral, and we have to calculate the total charge containing in a given region of space. So for this we have a statement in which a cloud of electrons are trapped in a region of two spheres of radii 2 cm and 5 cm. The charge density, which is charge per unit volume and represented by rho, and the given expression for the charge density is -3 into 10 raised to power -8 divided by r4 into cos square phi. So we have to calculate the total amount of charge which is trapped between two spherical surfaces, and the radius of the spheres are given as 2 and 5 centimeter respectively, and also the charge density is given. So we will use the spherical coordinate to solve this problem. So the total charge, which is represented by q, must be equal to integral of volume charge density into the volume element. This integral known as the volume integral of a given function. So we have a function charge density which depend upon two parameters as clearly indicated by the expression. It depends upon the radial component and the plane angle phi. So we have to calculate this integral, in which we have choose the volume element in the spherical coordinates. So we can put the expression for the charge density here, and the volume element in the spherical coordinates is given by r square sin theta dr d theta and d phi. This volume element has been discussed in our previous lectures. So r is varying from 0.02 to 0.05 meter. We convert them into meter and we write r, which is varying from 0.02 to 0.05 meter, and the half angle theta, which is fixed for a sphere, the half angle varies from 0 to pi, while the plane angle varies from 0 to 2 pi. And we will put the expression for density and volume. So some parameter may be cancelled, like r square will cancel with r4, and we have an r square in the lower part, and then we will integrate this integral for the given limits, and our answer will be equal to 1.8 pi multiply 10 to the power minus 6, and the unit of charge is coulomb, and we have a negative sign. This negative sign shows that the electron is a negative charged particle. Our second topic of this lecture is to discuss the gradient of a scalar function. So what is a scalar function? For this we will present an example. Consider a heating source which emit heating in all the direction of space. So the temperature near the source is maximum as compared to the temperature which is measured at a distance away from the source. So we can say that the temperature depends upon the position of the space, and the region of space where this temperature is spread is known as a scalar field. And for this we consider that let this field is represented by a letter V, which is a scalar function, and this scalar function depends upon the coordinate of space. So we take the generalized coordinate, and the generalized coordinates are u1, u2 and u3. Now sometime we also discuss the maximum rate of variation of this scalar function. So let's again, we have a heating source like a candle which spread the heat in all the direction of space, but there is one specific direction in which we have a maximum variation of this temperature, and this may be the perpendicular direction of the plane in which the heating source lies. For example, a heating source which lies in the xy plane, and the flame which is in the perpendicular direction to this plane, so the maximum rate of variation will be also in that perpendicular direction to the plane. So this is known as a gradient of a scalar function, and the gradient of a scalar function is defined as the maximum space rate of increase of that scalar quantity. So the maximum space rate in a specific direction is a vector quantity, and this is known as grade V, or gradient of a scalar function V, and defined as an dV by dn. Here dn represent the space coordinate and V is our scalar function. So in operator form we can write grade V as a del V, where del is the three-dimensional operator, and in generalized coordinate it can be defined as au1 del divided by h1 del u1 plus au2 del divided by h2 del u2 plus au3 del divided by h3 del u3, where au1, au2, au3 representing the base unit vector in the generalized coordinate, where h1, h2 and h3 representing the metric coefficients. Now in this slide we will representing the gradient of a scalar field in the three specific coordinate system. So in Cartesian coordinates, where u1, u2, u3 can be replaced with x, y, z, and the metric coefficient h1, h2, h3 and all these metric coefficient in the generalized coordinate equals to 1, and the gradient of a scalar function v in Cartesian coordinate can be represented by del v, and this is equal to ax del v divided by del x plus ay del v divided by del y plus az into del v divided by del z. And here v is a scalar function, but the gradient as a whole is a vector quantity, because this gradient has a 3 components, one along the x axis, one along the y axis and one along the z axis. So gradient of a scalar function is a vector quantity. Now in the cylindrical coordinates, where u1, u2, u3 are replaced by r, phi, z, and the metric coefficient in the cylindrical coordinate h1 is equal to 1, h2 is equal to r, while h3 is equal to 1. And if we replaces these parameters, so the gradient of a function in the cylindrical coordinate is equal to a r del v by del r plus a phi del v divided by r del phi. This r is here due to the second metric coefficient h2. h2 is equal to r in the cylindrical coordinate, and plus a z del v divided by del z. Similarly, the spherical coordinate, where all u's of the generalized coordinate are replaced by r, theta and phi. Here the first metric coefficient h1 is equal to 1, the second metric coefficient is equal to r, and the third metric coefficient h3 is equal to r sin theta. By replacing these parameters with the spherical parameter along with metric coefficient, so the gradient of a function in spherical coordinate can be written as. So after discussing the gradient of a scalar field, now we will discuss the divergence of a vector field. The divergence means spread. So in this slide we will discuss the spread of a vector function or a spread of a vector field. To discuss the divergence, it is necessary to understand the flux phenomena. Consider a point charge which is placed in a region of space, and we are bringing a test charge near this point charge. So the region of space where a test charge feel a force of attraction or a force of repulsion is known as the field of the main charge, and this field is represented by electric line of force or flux line, or sometimes we will call it the streamline. So the flux lines or the streamline will represent a vector field lines, and the number of these streamlines passing through a unit surface normal to a vector is known as a flux. That is, if we make a relation between these flux lines with a unit area, then the product of these vector field and the unit normal area is known as flux. For example, electric field lines passing through a unit area is known as electric flux. So the divergence of a vector field can be defined as the net outward flux of a vector field per unit volume is the volume about a point tends to 0. Mathematically, it can be written as diva. So we have a vector field which is represented by a, and Now we are discussing the spread of this A, which is known as divergence of vector A, and mathematically it can be written as the flux of that function, that is field line passing through unit area of that function divided by a unit volume, such that the volume about a source tends to 0. This is the mathematical expression and known as the divergence of a vector field. Now in this slide we will discuss the operator form of divergence of a vector field, but first we explain the statement outward flux. For a volume with enclosed surface, here will be an axis of outward or inward flow through the surface only when the volume contains respectively a source or a sink. That is, the net positive divergence indicate the existence of a source. For example, in the given figure we are discussing two charges, the positive charge, which in this case representing a source, and we have a negative charge, which in this case representing the sink. We are representing the field by pointing the outward arrows, and for a negative charge the electric field is representing by the inward vectors. And so when we have a source, then we will have an outward flux, and if we have a sink like a negative charge, then we have an inward flow through the surfaces. And the divergence in the operator form can be written as div, which is representing the divergence of a vector A. In operator form it can be written as del dot A. So this del is a three-dimensional operator which depend upon the coordinate of space. In this slide we will discuss the divergence of a vector function in three coordinate system. So in generalized coordinates, the divergence of a vector A can be written as del dot A is equal to 1 divided by h1 h2 h3 into del by del u1 into h2 h3, and the first component of a vector, which is a1, plus del divided by del u2 into h2 h1 h3 into the second component of a vector, which is a2, plus del divided by del u3 into h1 h2 into the third component of a vector, which is a3. And here h1 h2 and h3 representing the metric coefficient. In Cartesian coordinates, all metric coefficients are equal to 1, and u1 u2 u3 will be replaced with x y z. So the divergence of vector A in the Cartesian coordinate can be written as in this way. And similarly in cylindrical coordinates, where all u's are replaced with r phi z, and the metric coefficient h1 and h3 are equals to 1, while h2 is equal to r. By replacing these parameters, so the divergence of A in the cylindrical coordinate is given by 1 divided by r into del by del r, and the radial component of a vector A, plus del by del phi, and the phi component, the angle component of vector A, plus del by del z, and the r into the z component of vector A. In spherical coordinates, where u1 u2 and u3 will be replaced with r theta phi, and the metric coefficient h1 will equal to 1 and h2 will equal to r, while h3 is equal to r sin theta. By replacing these parameter in the generalized coordinates, we will have the divergence of vector A in the spherical coordinates. Now we will discuss the divergence theorem, and this theorem related a surface integral with a volume integral. So the divergence theorem is a useful identity which transforms a volume integral of the divergence of a vector to a closed surface integral of that vector and vice versa. And the statement of the divergence theorem is the volume integral of the divergence of a vector field equals the total outward flux of the vector through the surface that bounds the volume, and mathematically it can be written as the divergence of a vector field A through a volume is equal to the surface integral which contain that volume. Now, in order to understand the divergence theorem, here we are presenting an example in which we have to verify the divergence theorem for a unit cube, and we consider a function which varying along the cube in all the dimension. So a function a, and this is equal to ax x square plus ay xy plus az yz. So the given function is in the Cartesian coordinates, and the divergence theorem, the mathematical expression for the divergence theorem is the volume integral of the divergence of vector A is equal to the surface integral of that function which is A through the closed surface which bound this volume. Now we have to calculate the integral on the left hand side, and if the answer of this integral is equal to the integral on the right hand side which is the surface integral of the same function, then we can say that the divergence theorem is verified. Now to calculate the left hand side, we must first find the divergence of vector A in the Cartesian coordinates. The formula for the divergence of vector A in the Cartesian coordinate is being given, and in which ax, ay and az are the x, y, z component of vector A. For ax we can write x square, for ay we will write xy, and for az we will write yz, and then we'll differentiate with respect to x, y and z coordinate respectively. So that will be the divergence, and then we have to choose the volume element which is dx, dy and dz in the Cartesian coordinate system, and as each axis is varying from 0 to 1, so we will integrate this integral from 0 to 1 for each axis, and our answer is equal to 2. So the volume integral of the divergence of vector A for a unit cube is equal to 2. Now the right hand side which contain the surface integral of a closed cube, and as a cube can be splitted into 6 open faces, or a cube has 6 open faces, one face which is parallel to the negative axis, we have another face which is parallel to minus y axis and minus z axis respectively, and we have 3 surfaces which are parallel to positive x, positive y and positive z axis respectively, and we will obtain 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1 plus 1 by 2 plus 1 by 2. These are the answers for each surface integral, and the answer of this surface integral through the whole cube is equal to 2. So we can say that the divergence theorem for a given function has been verified. So let's sum up lecture number 6, and we have discussed the integral calculus, that is we have presented some example on the surface and volume integrals, and then we have studied the gradient of a scalar function in which we have calculated the maximum rate of variation of a scalar quantity in a specific direction, and we have also discussed the divergence and the divergence theorem. Divergence represent the spread of a vector function, and the divergence theorem related the surface integral with the volume integral of a given function. And in next lecture we will discuss the curl of a vector field, and the curl of a vector field representing the net circulation of a vector function, and then we will study a Stokes theorem which relates the line integral with the surface integral. I hope that you will understand this lecture, and if you have any question you can ask me at my email. Thanks and Allah Hafiz.